Okay. Well, everyone, welcome to the October 22nd DMAC meeting. And we will begin with my usual background about why we're here and what the rules are. I know most of you have heard this now several times, but for those who are new or who are listening, I think it's important. This is really a three-step process. County Commission decided to appoint DMAC to do initial mapping and recommendations. And that's the process we're in right now. This is our 8th or 9th meeting. And at some point, it will then go back to the Deschutes County Commissioners, probably late November, early December, and they'll make a decision as to accept it, reform it, or put it on the May ballot, May 2026. And then it's up to the voters in 2026 to say yay or nay to it. The maps the map being proposed will not have an impact on that election. So all 4 of those county commission seats will be elected at large. The commission has given us criteria for drawing our maps as nearly as possible. We're going to keep the precincts contiguous. There are 50 precincts in Deschutes County. We are trying to use existing precinct lines, which were revised after the 2020 census in 2022. We're not to unreasonably divide communities of interest, and we're going to consider some growth patterns. And we'll talk about that again today. We have what I call the 3 commandments that are included in the criteria from the county. One, no district should be drawn to help one political party or a candidate. 2, no district should be drawn that would disadvantage minorities. And 3, there shall be 5 districts. And that would mean no at-large positions. Everyone knows the population of Deschutes County has been growing for the last 3 or 4 decades. And the census from 2020 is very helpful history, but it's 5 years old. Voter registration is current and accurate and also reflects some of the growth that's in the area. So we're going to try and draw the maps to be approximately of equal size. We have a 5% variance that's been allowed. The second step then, as I said, goes to the county commissioners. And then the third step goes to the voters. If the voters approve the maps, they don't affect elections of county commissioners until January 2028. If it fails, then all 5 commission seats will continue to be at-large positions. So that's where we are and why we're here. And let's go to the minutes. Are there any corrections, additions, deletions from the minutes of October 15th? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Phil. Second? Matt, second? Discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We now go to the public comment part.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's 2 sets of minutes, October 16th too.
Oh, from the listening group. Okay, thank you. Also in your packet is from October 16th, a Thursday evening, where we had our listening meeting. And are there any corrections, additions to those sets of minutes? Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thank you, Phil. Second? Ned seconds. Discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. It passes. Public comment, and we have one person. Also, if you're online, we'll get to you after the people here who are present that want to testify. So, John Blankford, welcome. If you could say your name and address, please.
Everybody hear me okay?
You might speak a little closer to it. That would help. Better.
It's not on.
Either that or you have a very soft voice.
My wife doesn't say that.
Aye.
First, a couple of housekeeping things. Well, let me just say, I really appreciate you guys being here. I've been to a lot of your meetings. I've never seen anybody fall asleep up there. So I think everybody's paying attention and I appreciate all the time you put into this.
And could you state your name for us and address?
My name is John Blankfurt and 63555 Bridal Lane in Bend. At last week's meeting, a motion passed 4-3 to make voter registration the primary data used to draw districts. This is different than how any other county in Oregon does it, and it's not how congressional districts are allocated either. The bulletin reported that the vote was along partisan lines by who appointed them. But who voted for this is not reflected in the minutes, and I think it should be. If it's correct that Bernie, Matt, Ned, and Phil voted for it, I'd like you to acknowledge that and put it in the minutes because I think it's important that you're accountable to it. If it's not correct, then you should revisit it. Going forward, I think all motions should be formally voted on and memorialized in minutes unless it's unanimous. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. Do we have anybody online?
Will you ask them to do the raise hand feature?
If you'd raise your hand, if you're online, if you'd like to offer public testimony.
No raised hands.
No one? All right. We'll now go to item 5, which is staff updates.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay? Yep. Okay. Jen Patterson, Strategic Initiatives Manager for Deschutes County. I just wanted to clarify 2 points that we've talked about. The first one is the 5% range. There's been a variety of different references to the 5% range. So I just want to make that clear as it was pointed out to me after the end of the public comments during the October 16th. So the way the 5% range was calculated was the mean number was taken from each population set or from each data set. The 2020 census population, there was a mean number, and there was a mean number from the August 2025 voter registration set. We then did a 5% range up and a 5% range below that mean number. So overall, there is a 10% range of potentially between the least populated district that is on the map and the most populated district on the map. So I just wanted to clarify that. We've talked a lot about the 5%. It is a 5% range from the mean number above and below. In the guidelines, it is suggested that you stay within 5%. However, during the orientation meeting for clarification on August 27th, when we were talking about that data set during the guidelines, it was specifically said the goal was 5%. It is going to be a plus or minus 5, which would be a span of 10%. So that's how it was originally presented, but we haven't continued to talk about it in that way. So I wanted to highlight that. Yes, Melanie.
Okay, can you clarify that? You're saying at the orientation meeting, you or someone said that, even though in our document it says map should be drawn to approximately equal population size, recommended to be within 5 variants between the largest and the smallest district. That's what our
correct.
document
Yeah.
says.
And so I think as staff was doing a deep dive on this conversation, on the data conversation, we realized that the guidelines say 5% between the largest and the smallest. But the way it was presented was 5% from the mean from the largest to the smallest. So it would, in fact, made a 10% variance, which is the standard. So I think that the conversations have been saying that we're below the standards of the 5% of the 10%, when in fact that graph bar is the standard of a 10% range and not a 5% range.
So I just want to clarify, when we look at this and we see this box, that's a 10%
Yeah,
variance,
the box is a 10%.
not a 5%, which is what I think we all thought it was.
Yeah, so I wanted to get that conversation out in the public and talked about with you guys to make sure that we were talking about that correctly. And in the past, I think guidance from staff has not been articulating that correctly.
Okay.
True.
Do we know, because this conversation is always in the context to a certain extent of what's been going on in other Oregon counties. Do we know, and it's been pointed out before that actually the 5% number is a pretty big number relative to the other counties. And I'm just curious if we've been able to identify in the other counties if they did a similar sort of exercise in terms of the range. in terms of
So
like-
I have only gone back as this morning. My time was a little bit limited, but I did want to anticipate that question, but I was only able to look at one other county, which was the most recent redistricting in Washington County. And they got within almost single-digit voter counts of their districts. They did that by splitting precincts.
Right, okay.
The Secretary of State's guidelines that talked about 10%.
The Secretary of State's directive does not specifically say a percentage. There was from the Legislative Policy and Research Office, a background briefing on redistricting that was published on May 13th, 2020. And specifically what they talk about there, and only in this guideline, there's not a lot of information. And I did check with legal counsel this morning to see if we could get any further clarification. And at this juncture, this is what I have to work off of. There's not really, I have not been able to locate nor been given legal counsel advice on how to do this from scratch with a districting. So we're going off of redistricting information that has been put out there historically throughout the state. And again, this is specifically for congressional and legislative, so it's not specifically citing county level districting. But what they say under legislative district population, and I quote, the U.S. Supreme Court has held that legislative plans with population deviations less than 10% are defensible.
That's where the 10% comes from.
Correct.
I just want to make sure folks know that early on in this process, I looked up all the other counties. I sent a document out to the DMAC members. Every other county is with either just about 1% or under 1% on all of their districts. And I was just flipping through my documents here. For example, Multnomah County's charter directs them to be no more than 103% of the population. So within 3% was their goal, and they got under that by quite a bit. So if we were to be 10%, would be a huge outlier. 5% itself is already an outlier, but 10% would be a very large outlier from the other counties that have districts.
I will say for clarification, there's a difference between using the total population variance or range versus the mean range. So the range expands much bigger if you're looking at the total population. A case in point is Greg Bryant's map. If you looked at Greg Bryant's map where he was saying he was within 1 to 2% for all of his districts, he wasn't in with our range of the 5% range of the mean. He was within the 20% of the total population. So that is the same with ours. All of our districts that we have proposed are somewhere between 19 and 21% of the total population, whether that's the census population or the voter registration population. If you're taking the division of the full number of population, dividing that, you get a 19 to 21% range, which would be that 103%. If you're looking at a range with the mean number, it's a much smaller, I know it gets really complicated here, but it's a much larger, it's a much, it affects that range much more proportionally speaking than when you're talking about a population of 198,000 and some change, which is the census population.
No.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand why staff moved forward with something different than what is in our document that the county commissioner sent to us. Was there a conversation back to the commissioners, or?
No, it was, I would say it was.
I didn't have in front of me what the variance is between the largest and smallest, which is what our purview says. So.
It was 100% inadvertent, and
Okay.
and we caught it. I will say that staff drafted the guidelines and brought it to the commissioners as a recommendation, but it was not an intentional deviation. It was, we caught it, and as soon as we caught it, brought it to you guys. And so I will, I thank the person who brought it to me at the end of the community listening session. And I said, well, actually, I know that we have talked about that 10% variance. So then I just went back and did some research, and for full disclosure, this is a new process for us as staff and it, not math experts here, and maybe we need to bring one in. But as soon as we caught it, we wanted to bring it to your attention.
Other questions or comments? Melanie.
Well, maybe I'll reserve to when we're talking about the maps if we're not there yet. So,
And we have one more correction while we're on it. So Greg Bryan in his comments last week said the PS3 map, which has been voted to no longer be considered, that the data was incorrect. So that is partially true, and we just wanted to correct it for the record. In the October 8th meeting, when the DMAC narrowed the maps down to, at that time, were called map 2B and map PS3, which is Greg Bryan's map, the map and the data that was shown on screen was correct. And that was, at that meeting was when the DMAC gave staff guidance to take those two maps and come up with variations of those maps and see if we could get it closer to that range for both the census population and the voter registration population, which we did, and we presented those maps. When we popped Greg Bryan's PS3 original map back up on the screen, it had the incorrect data associated with that. So just to clear for the record, we wanted to show you the comparison of those two maps again, just so we have it on the record, the correct data. Again, it was the correct data. The map was correct in your packet. The data graph that went along with it, the precinct table that went along with it was incorrect. So we wanted on the record the correct map. So Lee is ready to show the PS3 map along with the PS3B map, which is now known as map B, just for the record. And if you want to take any different votes or discussions on that, feel free to, but we wanted to make sure that we had the correct information publicly on the screen and before you as well. And then the information, the PS3 map is not in your packet as you voted not to consider that any further, but we wanted to make sure that you had the correct data to look at. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lee just to show the two, and you'll see the PS3 map matches with what you were, the numbers that you were given for the October 8th meeting.
Here is the PS map 3, and we have the graphs showing obviously the population and the voters. And map B, what we're calling it now, was the variation that we came up with from the map 3. So this was the basis map that we had. And this was our variation that we came up with.
Questions for Lee? Bill?
Which, are we talking about maps now, or are we just talking generally?
Get
Or?
this correction.
The correction on that, but we will talk about maps.
Okay.
They just want to put on the record that the correction that was made for ES map 3.
But I thought we'd kind of gone, the next step beyond that was we went to the B we had last week.
did.
So-
Just for the purpose of correcting the record.
Oh, okay.
On the map.
So if I can, I'm looking at your numbers versus what we had and just trying, so for the record, understanding where the differences come into play here. I'm going to look at population. We could look at because it's the top graph here, but we were showing before 38,642, and you're now saying that should have been 40,293 in A.
Yes.
Okay. And in B, it was 35. The biggest one is B, actually, because we had it at 35,355, and you're showing it 40,641.
Yes.
Okay. I could go down the line, but I guess I'm understanding now what we're talking about here. So it's quite actually a big difference. I'm glad Greg came to correct the record on it. Sorry.
Sorry, just for clarification, I was getting the numbers pulled up in front of me. Are you reading the numbers from map B?
No, I'm reading the numbers from PS3 from previous.
Okay,
That's what
from
I'm
last
saying.
week, because we did, I think from October 15th, we didn't have the graph. Or do we have, maybe I'm getting this wrong. I didn't think we actually had the graph. We just had the precinct table For PS3, we didn't actually have the graph pulled up for
It's
PS.
going off this table, this
Okay.
one that just.
Sorry.
this is in
Yep,
black.
that's the correct one.
And just,
Bill.
just to clarify, he's going where it had the 2B, V2, the PS3, yeah, so that's the one you're using, right?
Correct, yeah. So
Which I think was the previous,
Other questions on the correction of that particular map, PS map 3? All right, thank you, Lee. At the end of the last meeting, we talked about getting some additional information on growth, as I recall, and was building permits and urban growth boundaries.
Yes, do we provided that map?
Yep, it should be, it's in, yeah, so we reached out to the city of Redmond, we reached out to the city of Bend and to CDD with the county and received all new dwelling permits issued from January 1st, 2022 through October 20th, 2025, and that was put into a map. That map was sent as a supplemental to the meeting packet. We were still waiting on data when the meeting packet went out, so I emailed the new dwelling permit map out yesterday afternoon. It is included in your meeting packet that was placed on in front of your seats. It's the very last map with the purple. Lee now has it shown on screen. It's also available for those listening online. It's available at deschutes.org/DMAC under the October 22nd meeting. There's a separate little click on to just click on that very specific map that's called New Dwelling Permit Map. And it's also included in the hard copy of the packet sitting by the door, but it is now on your screen. So that map is a map of all the new dwelling permits issued during that time frame.
And it's the permits, not confirmation they were constructed, but just the.
Correct. It's very specifically new dwelling permits issued.
I have a question.
Oh.
Yeah, so as we look at this, what's it really mean when you have a darker spot? Is that is there some way you're measuring the darkness, and why is the size of the spot get bigger or smaller?
Well, the purple are the properties that have a permit associated with it. So it was just attaching the permits based on the tax lot number, and it's showing the properties. And so some of those are going to be larger looking because perhaps they're like a whole subdivision that was built versus others might just be individual properties.
So like maybe a little dot would be one house, and then as the dot gets bigger, can we assume that the bigger it gets, the more houses in that geographic area? Kind of.
Yeah, they're tax lot based, so it's not point based. So
But,
so that corner of 33 doesn't necessarily represent tons of houses. It's just a big tax lot.
No, for a fact it does, but
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
like the smaller one on the very lower right. Just keep one house. Whatever. Right?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So basically, each tax lot with a permit is one, the size is based on the tax lot. For example, if you've got a 1,000-acre parcel that has one house, it's just going to show up as a big purple area,
it could, yes.
Okay.
If that's the case.
but doesn't reflect density.
No, not density, just it's showing where permits have been issued.
So the challenge I have with it is that let's look at the southeast because that's the biggest block in Bend in the upper right deal. So that's where the landfill is, and I guess Melanie and I know it both pretty well because we live in that precinct, and we're out there a lot. So I know what building's going on out there, but in that purple is where the new library is. In that purple is also the other side of 27th, where I don't think there's any new houses built in there yet. So there's the geographics of it. There may be a lot that ties them, but the whole thing's not solid building. Now there is an area is solid building, so but I have trouble with it being helpful in any guiding way. It's interesting to see, and then the other thing is there's nothing in 17 and very little in 29 and in Redmond. I'm kind of surprised at that, but I don't know Redmond as well, but there's a lot of houses in there, but kind of curious, but But just.
These were
on the
permits
first question.
issued.
Hmm.
These were permits that have been issued since 2022. And some of those may be completed building and some may still be, under construction or they've been issued but not built yet.
Yeah, I think this is helpful to show where growth is occurring, but without, I don't know what you call it, Lee, where the circle gets bigger the more there are, to show the density of the housing that's being built. It's not as informative. And I don't know if we can get that type of a map or type of data around, even if it's just in a spreadsheet, but where the numbers are for actual houses, so that we can think about the number of families and constituents that are going to be in these areas, if that's possible with the data that we can get.
We could certainly look at additional, mapping,
Housing
topology,
unit attached to the
um,
permit.
try to do some sort of like density heat map.
What's
or
that
something.
called when like the circle gets bigger?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. So I understand the
Big square,
conversation
small
where
square.
if there's a big tax lot, there's a bigger purple square, but that doesn't represent whether or not it's 5 new permits or 1 permit. And so you're looking to see it almost like a heat map versus numbers of that. So we will work to see if we can get that done in that way. For the next meeting, it probably will not be included in the mapping packet for Monday, but we'll do what we did last time if we can get it turned around and sent out and published before Wednesday's meeting if possible. But I hear what you're saying on the conversation where the data doesn't tell you how many permits, it just tells you locations of, yeah.
Bernie,
This is for all permits, right? Dwelling.
These are new dwellings,
Now, when you say dwellings, does that mean a house or a barn or both?
be homes, like there's residential, there'd be like multifamily, single family dwellings,
Does
but
it take in permits that weren't finished and had to be reapplied for?
Oh, it could. I mean, these are just, we just asked the cities for new dwelling permits issued from, because you're right, we could drill way down and we didn't, but we can get the data that you're interested in, but yeah.
A minor thing, I was just wondering.
Yeah.
I figured it would be a small amount.
Could be.
Thank you.
Bernie, can you talk into your microphone too, just so.
I got.
So one thing I do like about this is that you can see 38's kind of an odd precinct, and it wraps around Sun River and then it goes down below to which is Caldera Springs. And so you can see there's a lot of building in 38 that you wouldn't really think is, you wouldn't think of that as being in the district or in the precinct, or, I mean, in terms of impact of growth, there's places like that are a growth that we don't necessarily think about.
other comments or questions? Yes, Drew.
Yeah, so just to be completely clear about this, this is based, I would just make sure we're talking about, apples to apples. So you had the county data to hand. You went to the cities and said, here is what we want. And so we're looking at the exact same data that the county has versus what the cities have.
All 3 of them were reached out with the exact same question.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
I will say, one of the challenges is you're going to see a dot for a new dwelling permit. And it's hard to say, for example, if I look at Jack Straw, we all know where Jack Straw is. I mean, that's hundreds of permits. So the map may not, accurately depict what Jack Straw is with 300 units versus one single family dwelling unit elsewhere. So there are limitations to what you're seeing on the map.
Yeah, the other challenge is too, when you do a large development, you plan on selling the lots, the buildings over 5 to 10 years. And I don't know if they get all their building permits at once or they phase it in, but if they got them early anticipating something, then those houses might not be built within a certain time. Bill?
So Nick, are you saying that apartment complexes may only show 1 building permit? Because
I would need to check with the city a bit.
Because that's a huge thing, and if we're actually evaluating this for what precincts might grow and what aren't, because there's lots of apartment complexes that have been built and are being built, and that would move the population faster than the house building probably. But
True.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're here to draw maps, so I like maps as much as anybody, but it feels like what would be more useful here would be a table, kind of like we've had already on the precincts, showing the population and the registration, just adding a column or giving us a new one that just shows raw numbers of permits, yeah?
Well,
What? Sorry.
Melanie.
I think we should pull number of housing units permitted in each precinct, not just number of permits, as Phil was just saying. One permit could be for a very large building with a lot of homes in it. So, and I think that's, I'm almost positive our staff can provide that because we run a data dashboard with all sorts of housing unit information on it. So we know the number of units associated with a permit, so we could maybe help with making sure that. But I really like the idea of a table, so each precinct shows you where the housing permits and how many units are being permitted in each precinct since that time.
True.
Just to be clear on what you're suggesting, Molly, would we want something that has two columns to it then? Because the maximum may not necessarily get reached either. If you're talking about what I was just hearing you suggest is kind of what would be the high end number available on a permit.
Well, no, I think in the permitting data, a project may permit and not go forward or may wait, right? But I think it's the best data we have, and it was also part of what our purview was. And so I think if we're going to look at it, we need to look at the homes, whatever the units are. So if, the permitted number of homes that could, because if they have that permit pulled, that means they can potentially build up to that many homes, right? That's going to be more useful.
Bill.
Yeah, to be specific, so with apartments and things like that, it's really the number of living units or dwelling units within the building. So that's, I think that's what you're saying too, is that a development might have houses that are out in time, but I don't think they usually get the permits very far ahead because the permits probably, they're time limited. So, but I think but it's good to know that they're building in those, but the real big ones is the units within multi-family structures. I would want that as, it could be two separate lines, permits and then numbers of units. But
where Core Pine's old property is 22 acres, the master plan has been approved, but they haven't done anything. So they probably have not applied for any building permits. We don't know when that will happen, but I just wanted to make sure that wouldn't be included in the data we're asking you for, because right now it's 0.
No, I think a permit indicates more that you're moving towards building
Than a
than a master plan.
Yes, Ned.
The data looks kind of like I expected it to look, but I'm still struggling with, is this gonna, what are we gonna do with this data? Are we gonna change our district maps, or how do we use this information other than it's very interesting to have it, but I'm not sure how to use it.
Melanie.
I can tell you how I would use it is if I see that we have imbalanced districts where there are high population districts in Bend, and we know that those areas have a lot of building permits in them, and we know they're going to grow, and that disparity between districts is essentially going to grow. That would affect how I would look at a map and want to try to district and balance the population numbers or the voter registration numbers.
Oh, if it's about how we're going to grow, we're going to reshape our districts based on future growth. Is that the idea? I mean,
part of our
we're
consideration.
going to wait until the census comes in 5 years and use that data.
I just think part of our consideration was growth because we're using older census data. So that's just an example of how I would think about it.
Bill.
it seemed to me, Ned, that it's almost like we're being asked to interpret how we're going to use it, because it isn't really it isn't a legally required thing. And that's what I guess I assume they want us to do. I don't know, I'm interested in what other committee members, but I mean, it was just it was in the data. It wasn't one of the criteria in the rules, Neil.
Yes, under population, it said that there would be looking at growth, and they cited 2 examples, just as examples: urban growth boundary, and I forget what the other one was, but
I have it in front of me, and it says each district, as nearly as practicable, shall be contiguous, utilize existing precinct lines, not unreasonably divide communities of common interest and geographic boundaries, consider current growth patterns, and then i.e. building permits and UGB expansions. So it's a consideration.
Got it.
All right. Are we ready then to look at urban growth boundaries?
Can you clarify very specifically what you're asking from staff for further details or for further data on the permits, please?
Yeah, I think what we're asking for is another nice little table like this, all 50 precincts showing the dwelling permits as described here, but then going further to Melanie's point, the actual units per permitted, I guess. Is that the language?
Would be dwelling permits and one column would be total amount of units for that precinct.
Correct.
You don't need to have them broken down between each permit.
No, I don't think so.
I do think it's going to take a while because the data naturally does not come via precinct.
Right.
And so I would say that we're a 2-week turnaround time on this probably. Well, if we can do it sooner, we will do it sooner, but that is a realistic turnaround time for us. Is that right?
I think that's right. And I just want to take the moment to put on the record to really thank our community development department, City of Bend's community development department, and Redmond's community development department for turning around the data, and then Lee for coordinating with them and mapping the data in just a couple of days. This was a bigger task than maybe we anticipated it to be. So I just want to thank everybody for their support and coordination.
Please pass on that. Thank you. And Lee, thank you. We'll give you back your weekends pretty soon.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify whether the data that we're asking for and the huge amount of lift that we're asking a whole bunch of staff to create, do we actually have a majority of our committee asking for this data?
Well, we can ask that question.
I move that we ask for the data that Drew just described to Jen from the staff.
A second. Yeah.
Discussion? Yeah.
I kind of share with Ned the thing that, well, then, yeah, what is our plan if we're going to have them do that? It's going to be interesting. But I guess I'm wondering what other people think we'll use it for. Are we going to sit down and say, well, we need some other reason to make this change, and here's one of them. We could throw in then what we think is going to be the future growth here versus over here. I mean, I'm thinking that's what people are thinking, but I don't know if that's really a good consideration.
Well, I think first and foremost, we need to do it because we were asked in the directive to consider it. So to my mind, to not do this is to say that we're ignoring it. So how much we consider it, again, to Melanie's point earlier, how much each individual wants to have that be part of the consideration for what we ultimately think is the right map, I think is down to each of us going forward. It clearly is not the primary consideration. And so from that standpoint, you can look at it as something that maybe is just beside the point and kind of confusing the issue, Ned. I get where you're coming from, I guess, from that in a general way. But I think once we see the numbers, if there's something that comes out, it really, hits us over the head as kind of glaring, that's going to be something I'm going to look for anyway. If the numbers are just kind of falling in place with what we already expect in terms of growth, and we can see it follows along the line from the 2020 census to the registered voters and everything, then, it may not be that big a consideration, but we were asked to consider it. So that's why I feel like we need to get this data.
No.
Reasonable minds of people living on the east side can disagree about how much growth is happening there, as we have done on this dais. I would like to have the data so that we can ground that in numbers and say, here's what it shows. So I think that I don't think there's any harm in getting the data. This process has been continuously rolling from the start with a lot of pressure on staff, and I recognize that. I know our city staff are ready and willing to help as much as possible, especially when it comes to using our data on this. So I think we need to look at it also for the reasons Drew said.
Ned.
So if the numbers show a lot of growth in a particular area, which everything is growing, but are we going to violate our 5% box if it's over because it's more data that I mean, what's most important, the 5%, 10% box, whatever it is, 5 plus or minus, or these purple dots? I mean, I don't know what I'm asking exactly, except I'm not sure how to use this data, except what Drew is saying, we need to consider it. I agree, we need to consider it, but it's pretty much like we knew was going to happen anyway. Everything's growing.
Your question was whether or not if you use this data and it had caused you to vary then the 5%.
Is that okay then?
Well, that's going to be a question that the committee's got to answer.
Okay.
So,
Matt.
Neil. Or Phil. Yeah.
I'll do Phil then.
So I guess the question I have is because we've had a lot of debate about how we use the numbers we use, the population or the voter registration. And the vote was to prioritize the voter registration. And when I voted that way, it's because I thought it was probably a more accurate reflection of the populations than the 5-year-old since. So I was trying to be consistent. But with this one, it will be one more reason that people will say, well, how did you get there? Well, we used this and we used this and then we used growth and we sat around, we mulled it over and here's your map. You know, I worry about it being struck down for one, because I'm thinking of it legally. There's this issue of the 10%. We've talked about that a lot, or the 5%, but I just wonder how much of a criteria it could be. And I actually think the commissioners should tell us how much they want it to be if they've thrown in there, because it doesn't, our job is to apply the tests, not make the tests. But I don't, yeah.
I guess I don't understand why we can't have the data in front of us and have the most data that's relevant and within our purview to look at. And what you described, Phil, is a transparent process that this committee is supposed to go to so that the community knows how and why we made our decisions. And some of us may sit here and say, I don't think the growth patterns affect my decision. Some of us may say, hey, there's a 4,000 person difference between this precinct and this precinct, and the bigger one is in a very fast growing area. Maybe we should think about that. Maybe we should adjust our lines. I don't understand the harm in doing that. And I'm kind of surprised we're having this debate on just getting some data in front of us that we were asked to look at and consider. And then people can make their statements on how they want to use it or don't. But why prevent us from looking at it?
Drew.
Yeah, I think another way of looking at this too, first of all, to answer your question, Ed, as far as I'm concerned, it's quite clear this is not on par with the three absolute criteria that we have, which are the 5%, which are the contiguous districting and trying not to break up precincts. That's kind of our holy grail in this whole thing, right? And we have voted as a group, and we can choose to make those votes on record as maybe perhaps suggested earlier. But we have voted that we're going to use the voter registration as the primary point of delineation on this. However, to Melody's point, I don't see how having more data is harmful in this process. As long as, to your point, Phil, as long as we aren't saying it's part of the overriding criteria, because I take your point, I think at that point you put yourself in the position of a legal challenge, because this is kind of entering into the realm of the speculative a little too much. But you've asked a lot about community of interest, Ned, and this data actually could help inform a little bit that question around communities of interest. Okay, so that is part of the criteria that we have. So I think having this data can only help us. I don't see how it's a hindrance. Nobody is saying that it's going to take precedent over voter registration data or anything like that. So, like Melanie, I think I'd love to get on here, but I want to make that point. I think we should vote on this.
Yeah, Matt.
Yeah, I appreciate the discussion. I mean, I just figured, I know there was some question, I think, about whether or not what we're going to end up with is something that will be useful in the end. I mean, I'm certainly not opposed to more data. I just was trying to see whether within the group there was a a strong enough desire to require the number of hours that it's going to take to create the data. And I mean, quite frankly, I'm one of those kind of people that for me, the more data, the better. But by the same token, if the majority of this group isn't intending to use that kind of information in the decision making, I figured it was worth having the discussion.
Other comments? I think we're ready to vote. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
No.
Motion carries. That was a good discussion. Urban growth boundary, I have that next. Is that what you have on?
We didn't have it, but I think we can pull it up real quick. I think Lee already has a pre-programmed as a layer.
Yeah.
Yes.
I guess I'm a little unclear on that. Building permits made sense to me. Urban growth boundary, I don't know what you would bring to us on that. City of Bend is embarking in an urban growth process. Sisters is partway getting into theirs. We could receive presentations on those, but I'm not sure it would show us something that the building permits don't show us.
Yeah, we just have a map that shows the urban growth boundaries. We don't have, I mean, it's just a layer in the system, but we didn't pull anything special. Yeah.
One thing our respective city staffs could do, everyone has some sort of planning department or planning staff, and I'm sure they could present on the trends that they're looking at as far as planning for future growth. That's something that perhaps we could look at, but otherwise, yeah, we have the UGBs on our maps, so.
I don't think that's what we were looking for. We just were, it was included as one of the examples of looking for population, urban growth boundaries. And so I think the idea was just to show what the existing urban growth boundaries were. But if the committee doesn't want to look at that, that's fine. Phil.
But, and so I think it is relevant. If permits are relevant, this is relevant to me because there's places where you're already precincts that are probably already up against the urban growth boundary. And so there is no potential for future development. Whereas there's ones that you're inside the urban growth, it's been moved and it's undeveloped areas. There's several of those in Bend. So those may not have permits pulled yet, but they could be heading quickly that way if they're inside that. And I don't know how Redmond does it. I understand they have a big area they can build in, but I don't know which precincts it affects or anything. So I guess somebody would have to walk us through it almost by city, it seems to me, if they were going to really say, here's where we're going in Sisters, here's where we're going in Redmond, because it's hard to know.
Yeah. And just for clarification, we didn't have an action item for staff direction to do anything further with UGB coming out of the last meeting. It was specifically for the new dwelling permits.
But if we turn on the UGB layer, as you just had it, it is interesting. I mean, if you turn on the one you had for Bend, for example, you'll see precinct 33, you'll see where the urban growth boundary is. And in that case, it doesn't change what the proposed district would be. However, if you look at south on 97, you can see that it does extend precinct 2. Part of it is in one district, and I guess that's is that 42? It must be. Yeah. Anyway, it's interesting. You can just kind of see where the urban growth boundary is located. Of course, for Sisters and Lapine, it wouldn't matter because they're all fully within the districts. But Redmond, it could matter on the west side, for example. Otherwise, if you look around Bend, you can see just very, very tiny areas. But that is interesting for Redmond to take a look at that, just so you can see that some of the urban growth boundaries are in different precincts, or excuse me, in a different potential district than the current city is proposed to be in.
Well,
Yeah, Phil.
so with regard to that, so the map B that we looked at, Redmond as an example was the lowest of the number of registered voters that we used to get them in the box, the dark green one on the right. So if we knew there's gonna be a lot of growth, if they weren't in the box, I guess we could argue, well, they're probably going to get in the box or something. Because that would use it. So I think the walkthrough of urban growth boundaries by somebody that knew would be as interesting to me as the permits, because permits, everything since 2022, well, half of those might be voters already, or maybe more. I mean, so they may already be showing, but what isn't showing is where we're going. So
Yes. Ed?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I believe the urban growth boundaries are going to change anything. I mean, if it helps us define communities of interest, then I'm for it. But if you look at our maps, the the communities of interest are much bigger than the urban growth boundaries. So I think what we're still looking at is just looking at Bend and trying to make Bend work. The rest of the county is already in my mind where it probably is going to end up. So I don't see a lot of use of looking at urban growth boundaries. And the other thing, I mean, as Drew said, I really focused on these communities of interest, not just moving boxes around to meet the 5% criteria. And if you really want to get into data, there's another 20 or 30 different databases we could use to look at. And I know from living in that world my whole career, you can really get confused with more and more data. So, and you can make it say anything you want. So I'm just trying to keep it simple.
Other comments on the urban growth boundaries? I can check it off the box if I. Yes.
I mean, if we want to really focus on Bend, we can have Bend staff talk to you about where I mean, we've done a lot of work already in anticipation of the growth plan that we're going to be working on the next few years. I'm sure they'd be happy to tell you. And I've also seen county staff do some presentation on where growth is going to be. And the punchline is the growth is going to be in the cities more than it is in the rural counties in the next 20 years by the numbers that they have. So I think we can get some information. I don't think it's useless to have, but I don't know. For me, the building permits and where the homes are going in is more granular and can maybe be more useful on the precinct level. And I know you want to keep it simple, Ned, but this is not a simple process, which is why a lot of people take a lot of time and have consultants and software, especially to help with this, because it gets tricky because there are a lot of parameters you need to meet and you need to consider a lot of different data. So,
Ned?
Yeah, it's not. Thank you for that. And I believe it's not a simple process, but I don't want to overcomplicate it either. And one of the things that we talked about earlier is the other counties doing something. Nobody's doing it in mid-census, so that gives us a unique problem to solve with a unique set of databases to look at. And what I was looking at is trying to get a base at which we could add or subtract based on other information like building permits. So we're looking at other data, we're looking at population, we're looking at voters bases. But I think you got to have something as a base to work from, and that's what I was trying to get to, and I think that's where we're at. So, but you can get a lot of data, and Jen will never retire if we keep adding data.
Okay. My sense is from the group that, thank you, Lee, for the map showing the urban growth boundaries on Redmond and Bend, but the consensus is we don't need additional information on it right now. Is that correct? Okay, I'll take that as a yes. Let's turn to the two maps that we have, A and B. And you have the map summaries there too. Let's discuss these two maps and what you would like to do with them. Drew.
Well, I had talked about this some at the last meeting, maybe even at, well, the public meeting, we didn't discuss it because we were listening, but the last meeting, last Wednesday, I really feel it would be useful, and if the group wants to discuss this ahead of a motion, more than happy to have a discussion around it, but I really feel like it would be helpful to drill down. If we feel like we're getting somewhere with these two maps, and that's an open question, given the information we had at the beginning, are we comfortable with what is more like a 10% deviation than a 5% deviation, or do we need to kind of go back to the drawing board and try to get ourselves closer to 5? That's one point. The second point is if we're comfortable with these maps as kind of our working predicate right now, I suggested last time that I would find it really useful for us to drill down on the 5 or 10 precincts that are most impacted. In other words, the differential between these two maps, because so much of these maps, if you look at them, you know we're looking at the same thing. If you look at South County, by and large, it's all the same down there. So I just off the top of my head, having looked at it the other day, 49 is one that it is different between the two. Several of the Bend precincts are, and so I feel like it'd be helpful. Let's focus in on the differences, but that's just kind of my view, and maybe we could get staff to then come back to us with some of that.
Matt,
Yeah, kind of based on the number of comments we got at our listening session, it's pretty much aligned with kind of my observation of the two maps. I think map B tends to more nearly reflect a more reasonable grouping of communities of interest. However, I mean, it certainly could use a few tweaks, but I think as far as a base map to start with, I mean, I would certainly lean toward using map B, and in going through precinct by precinct, I mean, certainly we could stand to do a little bit of grouping that I think we can keep within our target goals, but combine communities of interest a little better than what's on this one. But I'd like to focus on map B.
Nellie.
Just on the topic of map B, I want to point out that our largest minority group population in the county is Hispanic Latino population, and that map B does divide the Hispanic Latino population that lives in the northeast part of Bend into 2 districts. So I think we should pay attention to that. And I want to say, jumping off of Drew's comments, I am not going to be able to support a map that is not within the 5% between the largest and smallest. That is our directive. That is outside of what other counties do, but is still less than the bare minimum. I think if we try to take it's at 10% and it's sort of barely legal map to the public, I think that's going to cause some problems. And so I think we should really strive as best we can to get that variance between the smallest and largest as small as possible, to show that we are trying to keep the voter registration equal as much as possible across populations, not dilute anyone's votes, make sure that each commissioner has the same amount of people to serve, and that no one is getting an advantage or having their vote diluted by that. I did want to speak to the listening session and some themes that I wrote down. A lot of themes around the process, of course, and whether this is the right time to district, speaking to voter registration. I think a lot of people said they want a county commissioner that is familiar with the issues of their communities, and that we should be careful not to favor any political party and reflect communities of common interest, including transportation links, someone mentioned. And I think I do want to comment on the one comment I heard that I think reflected, the downside of this process we're doing right now, which was the person that called in and said, I think Bend should just have one district. I don't care if that's illegal. And just sort of reflecting that they don't want Bend voters to have a say, as much as they think they do now in our county commissioners. And that actually really made me sad when I heard that. And I heard also from some other people just this concept that if you live in Bend, there's no way you can understand what's going on outside of Bend, have common humanity with the people that live outside of Bend, that someone from Bend could never represent the issues that are going on outside of Bend. And that sentiment that was coming across was just really worrisome to me, because this is a time that we really need to be coming together, and we have so many common issues across the county and so much that we can work on together, and that commissioners should be considering when they're making decisions. And so again, I really want to make sure that this process, as we go through it, we are not furthering that narrative of divide. And I think we need to recognize that Bend is about half of the population of this county, and that our votes matter and should matter, and every person's vote should matter. And that to the extent that there are people having this reaction of like, we should really dilute Bend so that they don't get to have as many representatives, I just think that's wrong. And I don't want this process to play into that narrative. And I don't think anyone here wants to do that, but I want us to be careful with the impact of our decisions. And so that's coming back to why I think we really should strive to get as close as possible in these districts, to make it as fair as possible, if we want to build any kind of public trust in these maps going forward.
Bill.
So I agree with Matt's idea of taking map B, and I think there's things that we've talked about. This was done because staff was trying to meet the numbers, but we had talked about some of these concepts that I'm going to mention now before. And really, to me, the issue is that 47, which is now in South County, is really not part of South County or the whole rural area that the South County District incorporates. So I don't believe it should be in there. I also think that 12, which is coincidentally the same precinct that Melanie was talking about, having the highest Latino population, that really belongs with the other green districts because that's where the district is there, but it's also, it's a rural district. It's outside the city boundary. And eventually there may be growth there, but right now it's more with the green. And so those two changes are ones that I think we should have those numbers adjusted. And then I think there's also discussion below whether 2 and 5, which is for 2 to be in kind of the West Bend district. It's really on the east side of town, and really but it's also part of the South County because it borders Knott Road, where there's going to be a lot of development right across Knott Road. A big project that's going to go in there now, and the border of that triangle. That's so I think 2 and 5 should be a couple ideas. I'd like to just consider moving some of these around and seeing what we come up with number wise. And I couldn't. I was going to have them do it between meetings, but I had to ask to have it done at here. But there might be other suggestions. But
Matt.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if we could actually make some of the changes that Phil had suggested and kind of see how the numbers play out.
Before we start making changes, I just want to highlight the pros and the limitations of the software. So Lee can absolutely make the changes or play around with districts as you would like live, but we couldn't then revert back to map B as it was. We'd have to go back and recreate that and build that here live. We can do that behind the scenes in between the meetings, but the software that he works in is real-time software. So I just asked if he could clone map B and then have the other map and then have one.
Or relabel it, or map B1 or something.
We can absolutely do that for next time. You could have the map B and then map C I think is how we're going to do our labeling. But today, when you want to start playing in map B and moving precincts around or in any of those maps, you can't just click a button and then it reverts back to how the map B looked just in real time today. We can definitely do that behind the scenes and have those different variations for next week. Just wanted to highlight some of the limitations on the software that he's using right now. It's live as it is.
Yeah, so we can change to make it yellow or orange, and then we can always change that back. But if we went through and change a whole bunch, those are live real-time changes. And so at the end of the session or whatever, if you're like, well, can we go back to B the way it was, we'd have to manually go back and undo those or whatever. So just be aware as we're editing.
Well, Drew.
Yeah, I would suggest a couple things here. I know, and I hear you, Matt, wanting to get down to a base map that we're kind of working off of, but both for the reason just discussed, but also to Phil's point, I think it is worth our keeping both map A and B in play at this stage. If for no other reason, they're the base case, if you will, that we put in front of the public last week. And Phil, when you were just talking about those precincts, 3 of the 4 vary between these 2 maps. So of the 4 things you were just talking about, I could look at map A and show them where you thought they should be. So
Right.
So I think we've got 2 working examples that both have their strengths and weaknesses right now, and it would probably behoove us to actually be playing with variations off both of them going forward, especially if we're trying to reach closer to the 5% imperative that we have, which I also would agree with Melanie. I think we should be trying to make an effort to drill down closer to that 5%.
I just have a clarifying question. So on the screen, just with the staff right now, this is still the 10% box, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So,
We can change that if you would like, if you all like to see a range of 5% versus 10%. It'd be 2.5% on either side of the mean.
so,
Yes.
so if we're this limitation, we can't really do it and then go back and it's because of problem. Maybe we could have individual members have things they'd like to see done, and then we could come back to the next meeting and instead of it being A and B, these were the changes that I suggested, or these are the changes somebody else suggested, and as ideas, and then come up with several variations. But I don't know, because otherwise it's hard to talk about it. I could talk about B changes and Y, but really I'm interested in seeing the numbers, because to me, we're primarily, our biggest reason I didn't really want to go to A was we'd kind of worked out a Redmond district that fit and a North County district that fit, and it seemed like we were down to really the juggling between West Bend, East Bend, and South County. And so that's why I kind of focused on that. There, as being B was really focused on that to me.
Mr. Chair.
Can I just offer one?
Yes, Matt.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that's an interesting, I think that's a good idea. I mean, if we've all got specific ideas and concepts, I mean, if it's okay with the group, if everybody would submit some suggested edits that we could come back to the next meeting with and take a look and see if there's some things we all agree on.
Neil, can I just offer, it's not a problem for us to do it now. It's just if we get so far down the path, oh, let's rewind and go back to the base. We can do that. We just can't do that until the next meeting. At the staff level, we think it's a great idea to go ahead and begin to, what might these look like? And then Lee can show the real numbers of what it looks like. I'm not saying what Matt's saying is not a good idea too. It's just, we don't want to give the committee the idea that it's not a good exercise to go through now in the 50 minutes we have left for this meeting, if that's what you would like to do.
And just to say on top of that, for the next meeting, if you have a variation in map B that you really like from the work that you're doing here, we'll just label that map C. So next meeting, you'll have map A, map B, map C to look at. But to create a bunch of individual maps in between is a lot of work for staff. That's a heavy lift. But we can absolutely, and kind of thought the intent was to work within the system live here. But we just won't be able to toggle back and forth between the variations of B per se in real time.
Melanie.
In real time, can you change this box or somehow tell us if we're in the 5%? Because we're sort of visually seeing it, but
Yeah, I have, I don't know if you can change the box in real time, but I did it myself.
so you can tell us
I
where we're
can tell you
landing.
right now. Yep.
Okay.
Let me just look at my Post-it notes, sorry.
I could do that. I'd probably have to stop sharing and go in and tweak numbers there for the box.
Do you want me read it out too, what they would be?
Sure.
So for the voter registration, so clearly the mean number stays the same. The low range would be 31,944. The high range would be 33,582.
can you? yeah,
582.
and
Yep.
Both.
Low range for voter registration, 31,944. High range, 33,582.
I said voter registration the first time.
This is voter registration again. It's voter registration.
We're going through each one. You're talking.
Nope, sorry. For the voter registration, the mean number for voter registration, the mean is 32,763. The range low is 31,944. The high, 33,582. I would like to just publicly caveat that I did this math just a few minutes before I came down here, and it has not been double checked. So I'm just gonna
The range on the population.
The population, the mean is 39,651. The low, 38,660. The high, 40,642. And if there's a will of the committee, we can definitely change our graph here to reflect that going forward.
Well,
That would help me visually to understand whether we are getting to the 5% that we're supposed to be adhering to.
I don't objection to creating a 5% box, but I'm also interested in a 10% box because I don't know we'll get to a 5%. And if we could split, you know, what the state legislature did is they split precincts. That's what caused the re-precincting in 2022. They had to do massive things because the legislature literally went through our county and cut out lines for both the congressional districts and the House and Senate districts. And so if we had to do one precinct, we could go back to the commissioners and say, well, to get the communities of interest, we need to split something. We suggest this. There's lots of other split races where, I mean, I don't want to create the extra burden, but if we're going to get this narrow rule down, the easiest way to solve that is do it within a district, not try to fit numbers into, and then say, oh, well, we can't make it, because we can make it. It's just that we'd have to go back to the commissioners and say, we'd have to do this because it is done. And that's a fact.
True.
Now, I think this is a very useful debate because I personally, on the one hand, as much as I would like us to hit this 5% number, I'm also looking at what we're talking about here being for maybe 2 election cycles before this whole work gets redone again. And it seems to me it's creating an awful lot of work and potential angst if we start splitting hairs, i.e. precincts, left and right in order to get us to that number. So I right now would hesitate to do that. And I would almost rather us be a little more elastic on that percentage number rather than start going down the rabbit hole of splitting precincts personally, because this is not a 10-year cycle for congressional or for legislative races. It's a 5-year at best. And we've already talked about how much of everything's such a moving target. We've already accepted that we're going to do voter registration rather than population. So it just seems to me this is something else that's, I don't know, it's complicating staff and the life of folks beyond what I think is called for what we're being asked to do. But that's where I'm coming from right now. I can be convinced otherwise, I suppose.
Melanie.
How do we know this will only be for 2 election cycles? That we have no county charter that outlines this process. This process has been outlined in a document from county commissioners who could, in the future, there is nothing to hold them to that. So I'm worried about that. I know that's maybe what will happen, but it's not for sure that will happen. And so I think the less equal we get these districts now, the more the disparity will grow over time as growth occurs in different parts of the community without a guaranteed check-in on when the redistricting will occur. Unless I'm wrong about that, but all the other counties that district have charters that say you will district on these schedules, right? We don't have that. So I just want to be careful about that. And again, this is the work that every committee that tackles these districting issues has to do, is you have to make some compromises. And that's why it says, as reasonably practical, try to do this, but there may be reasons why you need to say, hey, growth is happening here, or this is where we can just make it so that we can actually fit these numbers. Again, which is what every other county has done. Even after a census year had said, hey, we need to move things around because we want these to be equal. And so I know it's difficult, but we may have to look at doing that after we move around and try to get to that 5% number.
No.
So Neil, just to be clear to everyone, I'm not advocating splitting precincts, but I'm also concerned that we've now had one member say they're not going to vote for anything more than a 5% split. So there's almost so we're trying to get a unanimous decision that all of us like as a proposed map, we can't get to it if that criteria is there. So, but some of us may vote for something that's bigger. I don't want the whole focus to be on what one person's percentage is. If you want a 5% box, good. But a lot of us might be willing to do more than that. That's what my point. Well, yeah. Okay, well, we can vote on it, Melanie, if you don't like what I'm saying, but
the
the
rules-
rules is, can I finish?
Yeah.
The fact is that we've been assigned to do this. And so we've also been assigned to do this other thing, not splitting precincts. We got all these rules. So maybe we'll have to go back to the commissioners and say, we've tried this and we can't find without creating some gerrymandered district where we get this precinct that has this many right now. But my point is, we don't want to set ourselves in a point where we're only looking at the 5% if a lot of us are willing to do more than that. I'm for 2 boxes, so you can decide when you're not going to vote for something and the rest of us can go on. And that's why I said more than just the 5% box.
Drew.
Phil, I think you just tackled my point, which is we do at this point we've got kind of two contradictory things working here, which is the 5% versus the splitting the precincts. And I personally, at this stage, am not comfortable making a judgment on one or the other, given that we've been a directive to consider both. I like your idea actually of going back to the commissioners and saying, okay, you guys tell us which one we have to take as precedent, because we can't make this work under the current construct. I mean, maybe there's a way we could, but it would take us, I feel like, more weeks and months than we've got allocated for this process to get there. So I feel like maybe we should go back to the commission and ask the question.
We still have some time, and Phil, you were specific as it related to precincts 5 and 2.
Yeah.
And so
So, yeah, you want me to say what that was?
Yeah.
Or, so I believe that 5 should be in West Bend and 2 should be in South County, because of the fact that it has a bigger border and maybe more connected. 42 is the start of Deschutes River Woods, and that's what 5 hits. But 5 goes quite a ways in the center of the city, whereas 2 is really that portion that's right, it butts a lot of the South County down there. So I personally think it's more connected to the South County, but
I would just point out, Phil, that's exactly how you've got it on map A. Okay.
well, I know.
5 is part of the city and 2 is part of South County on map
Well, I
A.
do
So
it.
maybe map A is getting you closer to what you want than map B does.
Well, yeah, except for map A has Deschutes River Woods. I mean, I can tell you on both ones which things I think, but I don't think Deschutes River Woods should be in West Bend, because the people that live in Deschutes River Woods, which is 42, they like living outside the city of Bend. So to put them in as if they're in a community of interest with West Bend didn't make sense to me. So I just,
Maybe you work off A and say, take out 42 is what I'm saying. That's, you know.
yeah,
Matt.
Yeah, I'd like to finish up with taking a look and seeing what changes we can make on B. And then if we want to take a look at some tweaks on map A, why don't we do that next? But I'd like to see the suggestions that Phil's got, and then I've got 2 or 3 other suggestions I'd have for map B. And then let's see what that looks like. And then I'd certainly entertain doing some tweaks on A after that.
Right.
I'm good with that.
Right. So then Lee, did you understand what Phil was talking about on precincts
Can you just
5?
repeat again where
Yeah, which map, and then repeat which
one precinct?
like to
is
see.
going
It was, yeah, map B.
map B, okay? And changing 2,
So 5 and 47 go to West Bend.
and that would be
5
D. Yep, D.
D. And 47 go to D.
And to make up for some we lost there, 2 goes to South Bend, which is yellow or gold,
Yeah, goes into C.
goes down to C.
But South County or,
Well, I call South County C. It goes to C. Those are type of things. Then we talked earlier about 12 being part of A, not part of B.
Changing 12 to A.
Right.
Yes. Then the only question is, do we need more? What's that do to me is going to be probably is what, yeah. So those were the changes I had.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, I would have two additional ones to that.
So you've made the change, Lee, on this already?
Yes, I have the changes. So 12 has been moved in from B to A, and those changes down on the south end, 2, 5, and 47 have been changed.
And I think I can balance it a little bit better. If you take a look at communities of interest, for example, 25 is predominantly east of Highway 97. I would move that to the adjacent one. So
Purple.
move D, 25 to B. And then I would also move 33 to C. Because in looking at that, that is about 2/3 rural. Granted, it looks like it could have some additional development coming in, but presently, as far as matching up community-wise, that is predominantly a rural precinct.
33?
And that, if you pull up page 33 and look at the development patterns,
On the precinct map you're looking at?
yes. I mean, granted, it's slated for some additional development, but there's a lot of other precincts that are also, for example, Sister City Limits is looking to expand its urban growth boundary. I mean, looking at the development, there's going to be a lot of development all over the county, but presently, I just think that makes sense and it brings everything back within the box.
Neil.
Melanie.
So just to discuss 33 a little bit, because I live in 33, grew up in 33. The house that I live on in 33 is not on this map of the precinct because the streets aren't shown because they're new streets. The Stevens Road Tract and Stevens Ranch area, the huge, where you see that diagonal line, that's all going to be a square. They're already building in there, and there's going to be hundreds and hundreds of homes there. And the whole elbow, which you can kind of see where this line dips up at the bottom. That whole elbow will eventually be filled in through the southeast plan. So this is one of those high growth areas. Just I want to make sure everyone's aware. I would not call it a rural precinct.
Neil.
Yeah, Phil.
So, but when I'm looking at the big map, isn't everything inside or out to the east of the black line in 33, that's not developable, right?
This is the Stevens Road Tract.
Yeah, I
It's gonna
know.
finish out here. This is the elbow.
I know, but my point is none of that is even available for building yet.
I was just
Right.
standing on it with Hayden Homes
Yeah,
this
I
week.
walk my dog on part of it every day, but the point is, it has to go through the urban growth boundary process, and none of that is in the, all I'm saying is, isn't it true that everything to the right of the black line isn't developable? It's not buildable now. It has to go through a process. And I'll give you, the first part of Stevens Ranch came in almost 10 years ago, and it's finally being built. The first houses went in last year. But so I'm saying for today's world, that's not going to come in. It can't come in and to be developed very fast. And even if you get to the east part of 33 of Stevens Ranch, some of that is, you have to do all the land work they do, which the developer of the west one took 3 years to dig out everything and get all the rock crushed. And so it's not, I agree it's growing, but it isn't now is the only thing I'm bringing.
Melanie.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that it is now because we passed a bill to do a one-time UGB expansion to bring Stevens Road Tract in. The DSL has sold the land. Hayden has bought it. Was there visiting actually with the governor this week, standing on the property, talking about the homes that are going to be coming in there in the next, yes, it will take a couple of years, but it is much faster than the UGB process. I'll also point out just south of 43, there's another one-time UGB expansion that's going to be coming in, which is also something to consider. But 33 in particular is one of the places where we expect a lot of homes to be built in the next 5-10 years.
Ned,
In the precinct in 33 is already split, right?
pardon?
It's
Yeah.
already split.
It is.
Can we count them differently? We don't have to split them because it's already split.
Okay, you're talking about here.
That's where that green line is going through the precincts.
Yeah, but I mean, there's.
Let's bring up the difference between the two that are splits. There's on your screen in front of you right now is how much, what the population and voter registration count is for that one on that's over on the right-hand side, and then he can click on the one on the left-hand side.
Yeah.
So the one on the right-hand side has very little population.
Mhm.
Right.
Uh,
It's basically the fence line of the landfill going up past the Stevens Road. And so everything over there's real, 5-10 acre parcels or bigger at this point. So.
So if you did the split on the east side of 33, it wouldn't really help you on the population at all.
Sure.
Yes, Matt.
Yeah, I would offer that, I mean, if we're trying to keep rural versus urban or whatever, how we're trying to do separate. I mean, ideally, we'd follow the Bend city limits and the UGB, and we wouldn't encroach, and we wouldn't do anything with splitting subdivisions, et cetera. But we also have to try to balance the population in this case, the voter registration, a representative of the population. But the goal is to try to create some fairly even districts. I just think this does a better job of blocking them. So we don't have a bunch of odd lines and look like a bunch of gerrymandering that we're trying to avoid. It kind of tries to keep things somewhat similar. I mean, for example, granted 33 is slated for some development over the next 5 to 10 years, certainly. And it may change things the next time we do or whoever does the redistricting next time around. But at this point, 2/3 of it is more rural than the other third of it, and more nearly matches some of the rural areas versus and the bottom line is, in order to do some balancing, I think this makes more sense, for example, than where we had before with 47 and 5 being connected with South County that went into some high density subdivisions in the west part of Bend. So, like I say, in trying to create a bit of a balancing act in grouping similar type communities and populations, if you, like you say, drill down to the actual precinct maps, I think this does a better job than what we had previously.
Melanie.
Yeah, I'm just going to on the record disagree that 33 is more rural than urban. There are 5,000 people listed in the side that Lee picked. That's not the side that has 100 or so people in it, and it will become increasingly urban over the next few years. I do want to point out splitting 25 in 2 splits one of the predominant Hispanic Latino neighborhoods in Bend, and I really think we need to consider that. I also am going to ask the question about how do we and when are we going to get information about partisan lean for these maps and where the voter registration is so that we're not favoring one party over another. I can tell you what I'm looking at is we've packed a lot of West Bend all together. And I'm fearful that that's not going to reflect the voter registration balance of the full county, just to be frank. So I don't know when or how we can get that information, but that's going to be informative, I think, as well, to make sure we're not violating that provision of our purview.
Well, I thought what we could do on the question of voter registration is if we could do the maps first and then look at voter registration, which is public record. I mean, anyone could go and look at it right now on precincts and figure it out. And one of the reasons why I suggested that was it then from a public perspective and transparency, it says, okay, here's all the work we've done, the hard work, what we tried to do to come up with these maps. And we haven't even looked at the political perspective of it. But here is what the voter registration says as far as the registration. And it, you know, it's, and then take a look at it at that time. But from a committee perspective, then it's something you didn't really look at or considered until the very end of the process. That was my thinking that might be a better way to approach it. But
Can I ask what is the very end of the process, and shouldn't we need to make changes?
oh, it's true. I mean, we wouldn't finalize the plan until you then looked at voter registration. But I was trying to avoid doing voter registration until
I get
the
that.
very end.
Yeah, I get that.
Ned?
Well, I agree with what you're saying. I mean, I don't even think of voter registration. So doesn't intent count for something? I mean, I'm not doing it based on voters. I don't even know where they're at. I don't care where they're at. Actually looking back at it after we're done with the map seemed like we're saying we're a little bit guilty because we maybe did this and we didn't want you to know it. I mean, I don't know how that works, but I'm not even thinking about voter registration as a criteria. And so I don't know why we need to even check it out later, but maybe it's something politically.
It's something that was put in the criteria that said we wouldn't draw
We wouldn't do it.
maps that would favor one political party over another.
But we're not doing that.
We're not doing that, but
In intent and in all the discussion, we're not doing it. So what if
I
it
can-
ends up happening? Is that?
Ned, I
we're
think I
guilty?
can answer your question. I think without considering party registration at all, you are absolutely opening this up to a legal challenge. Okay, because the parties have vested interests in this stuff. As somebody who sits outside the two-party system with the Independent Party of Oregon, I can guarantee you the Democratic Party of Oregon, the Republican Party is going to look at this and they're going to say, "Oh, this map is disenfranchising us in this way or another." They will then put a legal challenge together. So one of the things we have to do in our work here is try to come up with something. It's not going to be bulletproof, but we at least have to consider these things so that they aren't opening ourselves completely up to that kind of legal challenge. I had a second thing I want to mention, which is I think this is interesting playing around with this map. But I also think it shows us we're not getting anywhere closer to the 5% at this point. So I'll go back to what we were talking about earlier. I would like to, we can have some more discussion right now on this if we want, but I would like to table a motion about going back to the larger commission and asking the question, which are we supposed to determine this on? The precinct unification theory, I'll call it, not splitting precincts, or are we trying to drill down to 5%? Because I don't think we can do both. And I think I want to have that question answered by the commission before we go too much further with this. We can play around with this some more, but I don't think we're getting very close to the 5%. So then we start talking about how do we split precincts? And I think that's for them to tell us.
And I'd just like to respond to Drew's point there about the commissioners. As we've reiterated, we've had many conversations on the map criteria and the map recommendations. And I will say the 2 points that you're both, the splitting the precincts and the 5% range, were both suggestions in the guidelines. And that I think it was intentional that there wasn't an exact, you need to do this. So the wording for the precincts were, each district, as nearly as practicable, shall, Part B, utilize existing precinct lines. And then again, for population, it says recommended to be within 5%. So there wasn't strong, firm language on either one of those data points, and I think for a very specific reason. We can continue to go back to the commissioners for clarification, and I certainly don't want to speak for them right now on that, but I can say from the summaries of all the previous conversations that we've had with them on this was that we did not get direct, specific requirements for those two specific areas.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and thank you, Jen, for that clarification. I would say, I think that's putting too much of an onus on this group to have to make that call. I think that's something the commission should do, just as they've made the decision. I mean, I personally think our life would have been a lot easier if they'd allowed us the option of having a 1 at large plus 4, but that has been knocked out of the park too. So I personally think that the onus should not be on us to have to wrestle with those two questions, because that just puts us in even a thicker wicket than we're already in. So.
All right, if there's a majority of staff, or I'm sorry, a majority of members who would like staff to get that clarification, I can bring it before them on Monday at their commissioner meeting.
Melanie agrees. Bill?
Phil suggested it, so. Just following Phil's.
Well, now, I suggested it before I heard how hard a task it may be to brought it up again. I mean, in a way, I'd prefer we ask him again, but I say that with the other way we end up is we just come up with our best effort, then they have to pass it, and then it has to pass the voters anyway. So we're just trying to get the best we can do. And it would be, if the number was the priority, because we've had one member said it was the easiest way to do, it would be to cut a precinct. But I mean, just having done this for like we've done it, because we've already kind of come up with some. I mean, if you just took the differential between the three that were pretty close all along, or the two, and then I don't know. I just think it's going to be very hard, but I don't know. I hate to put the commissioners out.
Ed?
Well, I'm back on this. We got to look at whether we're doing an RRD thing. That really confuses me. So, as we go through the process, as we debate all this stuff, are we saying, well, we'll do it here because it's an RRD, and versus if we don't even think about it? I mean, I've been in business for a long time, and you guys, there's more attorneys here than engineers, thank God. But
Yes.
If I do something and I'm innocent, so what if they sue you? That doesn't mean you can't do everything perfect, and the lawsuit is to define whether you did something that you should be guilty of or not. So I'm not going to play the game of worrying about whether it's and I agree with Drew, somebody will probably challenge it. You're not going to stop that, and you can't make your decision based on somebody might not like it later. I mean, I can't anyway. So I think we just do the best we can with what we got, get as close as we can. We're midterm. We can't follow what other counties did in 2022. We can't follow anybody, and nobody else is doing it, at least in my mind. So we just got to come up with the best we can. I want to focus on communities of interest, not just moving the boxes around to make the numbers right, and hit it as close as we can. And if we get voted down, we get voted down.
Yeah,
Well, you were polling on whether.
I was polling on whether to go back to the commissioners. You're going back to the commissioner, Bernie, back to the commissioner. Okay. Drew?
Well, I just want to say, for the record, some of us are neither engineers or lawyers up here. But
You want to be though.
yeah,
wanna be.
above my pay grade in both cases. But Ned, I think, there's this notion, and I think you'll appreciate this as an engineer. You have checks against your work. If you're doing math, you have checks against your work. I think the party registration thing is just a check against our work. That's how I would view it. And I kind of agree with where Neil came out on it, although to Melanie's point, I don't know what near the end means exactly, but I don't think it's something that we should have been looking at up to this point in time. But I just think before we're done putting this forward, we look at it, because the precedent is out there. Every other districting map that is done anywhere considers party registration. Now, as somebody, again, who sits outside the two main parties, I'm not sure I'm that wild about it, but I think it's got to be considered.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge too that you said we're not doing this like any other county, which is absolutely true. And if we had an independent redistricting committee or some other process that brought this committee together, I think there could be a lot more credibility to saying, oh, we're just kind of trying to do our best. But this committee was formed in a partisan manner. And we have to grapple with that of how the public is perceiving this. And we have heard about how the public perceives that. So I think we do need to check, even if our intentions are good, because if we submit a map that the public sees is very disproportionate on political parties, they're going to assume the worst. And they're going to say, well, you were appointed directly by the commissioners. Nobody here had to apply. We're not an independent committee. We are a commissioner appointed committee. So I think it's important that we show our work and say, here's the way we tried to make sure that we were aligned with this purview, that we cannot be favoring any political party or incumbent.
Bill.
I have a little different take on that. Most of the arguing about districting is done because they're partisan races. And so they're between Democrats and Republicans, primarily, with the other parties playing a smaller role. From the start, with these being nonpartisan, and the fact that about, like in our county, I think maybe the numbers are 60-some thousand when you add non-affiliated, independents, and other, that's a hugely larger group than either of the parties. I think the parties is washed out in county commission races now with them being nonpartisan races, because it doesn't even show up on the ballot what party you're with now. So it's changed, and most of the stuff we're seeing in the press is legislatures and Congress talking about it, and we're in a different thing. So I don't think the partisan part is really relevant, but it is publicly available. But I don't think we haven't talked about this with or Ned and I haven't, but I kind of get this. I have the same point, that to be reviewing it, that it's like, well, that wasn't the design criteria we had. We had the communities of interest and the numbers. So,
Matt.
Yeah, just to kind of capture where we're at the moment, would it be possible to save the edits to map B?
We'd make it map
Maybe it's
C.
map C or whatever for further discussion down.
Perfect. Drew.
Just really quickly responding to what you just said, Phil, I would love it that you're correct about that. I'd love it if we're in a post-partisan world, but let's be honest, the three commissioners who gave us our instruction were elected as partisan commissioners. We've only changed the nonpartisan status. Well, he was before that. Yeah, he was originally elected as a D. So we're not quite, I don't think, to that post-partisan world. The quicker we get there, the better. And I appreciate you recognizing that the largest chunk of voters in this county are non-affiliated voters and otherwise not major party voters. So, yeah, I think we're moving in that direction. And to your point, I think we are in a different place than most of the strictly partisan races that go on. But it would be naive for us to suggest that the two major parties are not taking a very strong interest in this process here and how it will go down, and that they wouldn't act if they thought it was against their interests. That's all I'm really trying to say.
Yeah.
So I think we have a consensus to go back to the commissioners. And I want to make sure we know what the question is. So how would you phrase it again? And we'll see. That's what we.
Well, I'm not going to wordsmith it here publicly, but basically clarification on if you have to choose, or clarification on the fact that it's very difficult to stay within precinct lines and within a 5% range from the mean population data set. And the committee is looking for further clarification if they had to choose one or prioritize one. What would that be? Or if there is a different guidance from them, something along those lines. Great.
Captured that.
Beautifully. Captured it
Yep.
beautifully.
I'll go back and watch what I just said.
Good. Thank
Sure.
you.
That's all right.
He had his hand up. Oh.
No, that's all right.
Oh, okay. All right. Nellie.
Since we have 15 minutes left, can I raise another question just for transparency for the public? So at some point, we will have a map that we think should be forwarded, and we have to assign the 5 seats of the commission to this map. And in my opinion, the only fair way to do that is to draw numbers out of a hat and assign them to the colors. But I wanted to make sure that that was how we were going to proceed and sort of name that now so people know what to expect, so that we're not, because there are incumbents that may be running again, that we're not running into any of that unfairness or perceived unfairness with assigning the numbers to the districts.
I'll just pipe in there too. So staff had extensive conversations about that process in the drafting of the guidelines and just setting up the DMAC, as well as brought it before the commissioners. It was intentionally not in the guidelines. However, our expert on this, which would be Steve Dennison, our county clerk, is out of town right now. He'll be back next week, but feels very strongly about drawing by lot, and the definition that I received by lot is similar to that, but you pull it out of a hat and kind of just assign all of the numbers. But if there is a will to defer that conversation until next week when Steve is here, who can answer further questions on kind of the precedent for that. But my understanding is from all of our conversations with the county clerk and also with the previous county clerk, who was a part of our working group through setting up the whole DMAC process, is that about the by lot process as the standard for numbering districts in these cases.
And I think it's clearly within our purview to make a recommendation of how that's to be done. And here's what we've done. We aren't prohibited from doing that criteria that given.
And Steve's, in all of his conversations, to paraphrase him, but again, not to speak with it for him directly, was that it's usually one of the last steps of the process is once you have your map and finalized and voted on by the committee, there is a by lot process, and he's been part of that before and can maybe speak to it a little bit further on exactly how that plays out, but just to kind of paraphrase previous conversations we've had around that conversation.
True.
Yeah, I understand the issue. I'm not understanding, I guess, completely the timing. I'm a little confused. When we talk about the existing commissioners, I don't know if we're placing them in these districts. These districts have not been created by law yet, so I don't know how we place them in these districts, number one. Number two, they're going to be elected again in the spring at large. So I feel like that piece of the process, I'm not even sure that's our remit to handle. I don't know. I'm a little confused there about the whole timing of this. Do you understand what I'm saying?
No, because I think you have to know, you'll have to assign the districts out. If you look at the other counties, District 1 is South Eugene or whatever, like the number goes, because we elect commissioners by seat here, you have to have a district go with a seat. I agree that it's confusing because we're going to disregard that for this next election, and it's going to be an at-large election because we're still be voting on the maps at the same time. But I think when you put the map in front of people, it should show which seat goes with which district, right? So I guess
I think it's putting cart ahead of the horse. I honestly don't see how we do that either legally or practically, because you are then putting in people's heads the notion that the districts are already in place. And they aren't. We're still electing at large going forward with this particular election.
So I don't know how exactly we end up on this thing, but I think they're different things completely. The election's going to go forward and for next year, irrespective of this, the issue then is, but on the ballot in May is the districting. I guess, is it required? I don't know, maybe Neil, you know this, is it required that they be numbered when they're on the ballot, or is it just that or could they be numbered at a different time? Is there a rule on that, or?
I don't think there's a rule. Clearly, if this was adopted, the maps were adopted, you'd have to assign at some point what those locations were. And it might affect a candidate who has until March to file.
Yeah.
And if he knows what the district number is, which district does he want to file for?
Yeah, you could change, but as long as you waited past that, there's a date you can't file beyond. As long as you assign numbers after that, it would be random. I mean, it'd be disconnected. So, yeah.
So to address that date, and it might be behoove the committee to wait until Steve gets back because I don't know the legality of not numbering the maps. I believe in all of our conversations, we believe the maps would be numbered. So as it stands right now, even though they're at-large seats, they're at-large seats by position number. And so if there was a map adopted, it would then be by district number. So that would be in lieu of the position number. It gets very technical and very tricky, but the ballot measure language is due before the final candidate filing is due. So it would allow, while the map wouldn't affect the current elections that are taking place next year for the 4 positions that are up, it would allow a candidate to change the position they're running for from when the map is published with the ballot measure to when the filing deadline is. So they could already file, they could change their filing deadline on what position they wanted if they so chose. Now, again, I don't know the technicality of requiring a numbered map, but I haven't had or been part of any conversation that didn't require or didn't involve a map being numbered by district. So we could bunt that and prep Steve Dennison for this conversation as well for next week.
Yeah, I would really appreciate getting some informed view from Steve on this because I'm not at all insensitive, particularly from the candidate's perspective. I'm not at all insensitive to their interest in this process and how it affects their futures, both, in terms of politically, family life and everything. It's not, it's not uncommon in situations like this where people sometimes up stakes to be in a different residential area for their races. But I come back to the point that at least potentially to me feels like it could be putting cart ahead of horse. And I don't think, saying the current commission is approved for next year is positions 1 through 5. I don't necessarily see that as being analogous with districts 1 through 5. But I would really like to hear what Steve has to say about that and his position on it and the sort of legal footing that we're on. I'm not convinced at this point until I hear from him that that's a decision this committee necessarily has to be making, I guess is all I'm saying. So it'll be really helpful to hear more from him about that.
Other comments, questions before we adjourn? All right. Jen, were you going to say something?
I just want to make sure that we have, just to be in line with our requirements, that we have a voter or a majority member consensus of now having map A, map B, and map C. Yep. Okay. Okay, great. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. We are adjourned.
Did it again.